am now live. I'm about to do a conversation with Theodore Shoebat, which will cover many different things. As long as we can get the connection to work, we should be fine. So let's hope that this has gone according to plan. So we just give him a minute to get connected up, because he is a bloke and he does like to take a little bit longer than the ladies. So while you're doing that, I'm going to share the event out onto Facebook so that everybody knows that we are live once I've got Theodore here. That is, of course, considering that he manages to connect up all right. I'm about to find out. So I'm just going to sit here and wait for a minute while Theodore, now anybody who doesn't know Theodore Shoebat and his father, Wally Shoebat, they cover a lot of things, including the history of Islam. His father is an ex-Muslim. Theodore knows a lot about history. We don't always share the same views. We do, however, share the love of freedom of speech, which I think is the most important thing that we're losing right now in today's society. So hopefully once he realizes that we are actually live, he will start he'll connect up. Hopefully he'll connect up. So let's just see and make sure that that happens. Let's try adding him again. Sorry, this is the technical stuff, and I'm not that brilliant at it, and I'm still getting used to how it's supposed to be done. So it doesn't always work first time, but we are getting there slowly but surely. And hopefully he will be with me in a couple of minutes if he remembers to click onto the link, which we can only hope that he manages to do. So let me just send him a quick message. Bear with me a minute. Okay. I'll just keep adding him in until he will eventually realise that I'm trying to connect with him. She says. She hopes, otherwise she's sitting here like a donut talking to herself, which is not the first time, but it certainly should be the last. You will hear notifications in the background because I've got my Facebook open, so I can share it out to Facebook, share it out to Twitter. Anybody who wants to watch this live, if you share it out on your Facebook, other people can also come and they can see it live too. But at the moment, we're having trouble getting Theodore online, which, I mean, he's just took longer to get ready than any girl I know. You know, I'm just saying, Theodore, so you know. So let's just hope that we get him this time. If it doesn't work this time, then it's going to be a second and a third attempt until I get them on. He is there waiting. I know he's there waiting because we've literally just done a test. But you know what they say, nothing ever goes according to plan. But we're going to cover different subjects as well. We're going to cover things from the Crusades, and I know that he also wants to talk about obviously the election of Donald Trump, which I think could be interesting to compare with what we see going on in our country right now, with protests, etc., going on because Donald Trump's been invited by the Queen. God forbid we invite Donald Trump when we can invite so many extremists into the country. It seems to me that there's double standards going on. So let's just hope that he twigs that I'm actually calling him. If it doesn't work this time, then I'll be having to set it all up again. I don't want to do it all again. But at the moment, we have nothing. Right, let's try again. Now he messages me saying, try it again. Just did. Nothing ever goes according to plan, does it? It will get interesting once we get him on here. I'm really sorry that you're having to sit and look at my boat race while we're waiting.
Hello,
and
hello.
we have him. We have him, finally. I've been sitting there going, he is around. But I did sort of make comments about the fact that you took longer to get ready than any girl I know.
It's not because of that. I had to go outside and water some of my plants.
We won't go into the whys and wherefores, all right? We both know that it's because you were making yourself look beautiful for the ladies. So what I wanted to cover with you tonight is, I've titled it Theodore Shoebat Crusades and Other Things, because you and I, we both know that our conversations can go from one thing and into another and into another.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to make it about one specific thing, but I do want to speak to you about the actual the Crusades, because we've been taught throughout our time, and I was talking, funnily enough, with my mum about this the other day. Mm-hmm. When my mum was at school being taught about the Crusades, she was really told pretty much the truth. But when I was coming up through the education system, that isn't what we were being told. And as time has gone on, it's been instilled into us that the Crusades were these really bad people, and that they were the enemies, they were the bad guys. And my understanding of it is that they were a reaction to an action. Now, I know you're a little bit of an expert on the old Crusades, and you've done your homework on it. So I want to ask you, were the Crusades the bad guys, or were they just a reaction to an action?
I think they were both. But they were really a they were a reaction, but at the same time, they were really a continuation. Is there an echo?
Not my end. Have you got an echo your end?
I'm hearing a little bit, but it'll probably go away. What I would say is that the Crusades were really like a continuation of what the Greeks were doing. So the Greeks were having to fight off the Muslims, and when we talk about the Muslims, what we specifically mean are the Arabs and the Persians and the Seljuks who would come later on. And the Greeks, they won some battles, but they lost a lot of battles. And so the Greeks, the problem with the Greeks, and when I mean the Greeks, I'm speaking of the Byzantines, right? I'm speaking of the Byzantium Empire, the Holy Roman Empire of the East, which was headquartered in Constantinople. And they were winning a lot of victories, but at the same time, they were losing a lot. And one of the reasons why they were losing is not necessarily because they were bad warriors. It had a lot to do with the internal corruption that was happening within its own government. So, for example, the military was being horrendously underfunded. I mean, like, they were taking money that was supposed to be funded for the military, and then they were sticking it in their own pockets. Like, there were individual senators who were doing this, magistrates, government officials who were doing these sorts of crimes. They were stealing money that belonged to the soldiers and putting it in their own pockets. So the soldiers were being underpaid. And in that state of being underpaid and being mistreated, these very soldiers were being underfed. These very soldiers were being underarmed. Like, they didn't have the refurnishment of weapons that they should have had. So they were using old weapons. They were not given newer, more advanced weapons. So it was like a big cluster of just crap that was happening to these soldiers. So their morale was very much down. So they were losing. And the peak of loss for the Eastern Christians was the Battle of Manzikert. Thousands of these Greek Byzantine soldiers lost their lives. And again, it had a lot to do with corruption from within. So, for example, the Christians should have won that battle. But one of the reasons why they lost was because the son-in-law of the emperor, and the name of the emperor is the Emperor Romanos Diogenes, his son-in-law betrayed him and actually took his troops who were supposed to be fighting in the battle. He withdrew his troops from the battle and went back to Constantinople and declared that the emperor was a traitor, and that the reason why I am returning is because the emperor betrayed us and he's not even fighting, he's a coward, etc., etc. And then his own wife betrayed him. And that's the saddest part. His own wife betrayed him, and she was with his general, and together they were conspiring to kill her husband and actually take the throne. So here is Diogenes. A bunch of his soldiers are now gone. He's stuck with the remaining part of his army. A lot of those have already died. So they are completely outnumbered. And so they lose. Majority of the soldiers are either killed or they are captured. And Romanos himself is captured. And so he is taken to the Sultan, and he has a private meeting with the Sultan. Alp Arslan is his name. He's a Seljukian warrior from Central Asia. The Turks are not really people from Turkey. I think this is one of the greatest misconceptions about Turks. People automatically think, oh, Istanbul in Turkey. No. The original homeland for the Turks is Central Asia. Mongolia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan. I mean, those regions. Those were, in fact, the original headquarters for the Turks was not Constantinople, it was Azerbaijan. And the Seljuks conquered Azerbaijan, which was originally inhabited by Persians, and made that their central headquarters. And so there's this private meeting between the emperor and Alp Arslan, and Alp Arslan kind of beats him up a little bit, throws him to the floor, kicks him in the face a few times, and tells him,
like you do.
What's that?
Like you do.
Say that one more time.
Throws him to the floor, kicks him to the face, of course, like you do, like as if that's just a common day occurrence, which I'm sure would have been a common day occurrence.
Yeah, well, he beat him up because, and after he beat him up, he said to him, why didn't you surrender when I gave you the chance? Because before the final end of this battle, before the denouement of this battle, there was actually a number of representatives from the Sultan who visited the Christian camp and said, listen, this is the final chance to surrender. Make peace with us and we're not going to fight you guys. And the Christians refused. So they lost. And I think that they knew, well, I don't know if the emperor knew that he was going to lose that, but there were definitely people within his ranks who knew that there was going to be some betrayal taking place. And the emperor said, he said this in a way, it was a way of saying, I pity you. You should have surrendered or else you wouldn't have suffered so much. So the Sultan lets the king go. He lets the emperor go. And on his way back to Constantinople, he is told that your wife is saying that you are no longer emperor. In fact, his wife was extremely upset when she found out that her husband was alive. She thought he was dead. Oh, my husband died. No, he was alive and he was coming back. So she was very much upset by this. The funny thing about this is that she thought that she and this general friend of hers were both going to become the king and the queen, or the emperor and the empress. He ended up taking her and throwing her to a monastery where she was a nun for the rest of her life. So she never got to even rule without her husband. And the people who did the coup got rid of her. So the hunter became the hunted in this sense. And when the emperor got back to Constantinople, now there were two divisions in the city. There was people who were loyal to the Emperor Romanos, and there were people who were loyal to his stepson, because he had a stepson. And it ended up in a very bloody civil war, with the stepson winning and actually having his father murdered. So it was an extremely sad state that the Roman Empire was in this time. And again, it's not, the reason why they lost wasn't because they didn't have the capacity to win. They surely did. The reason why they lost was because the people within Constantinople no longer really cared about Christendom and fighting for Christendom. I mean, Romanos was an idealist, and look what happened to him. He was killed by his own wife. It was at that time people who were just bent on power, their own stomach, and that was it. So the Greeks knew that they needed the help of the West. That was the bottom line. So they went to the Western Christians and told them, we need your help to fight off the onslaught of the Turks. And that's what happened. So the Crusades was a reaction in a sense that they wanted to fight to protect their Eastern Christian brethren who were being killed, who were being attacked and invaded. But at the same time, the Crusades was a continuation of the very war that the Greeks were participating in. Because to say that the Crusades was merely a reaction and that for 500 years or so, the Muslims were just invading without any sort of hindrance would be to ignore all of the battles that were led by the Greeks. So I would say that it's more adequate to observe or to affirm that the Western Crusades were simply a continuation of the Crusades that were already happening in the East. So that's what I would say.
Would you say in your personal opinion, were we the bad guy? Which is what we're
no, but your voice is kind of low though. Is something wrong with your speaker?
No, I think. Hang on, let me turn mine on.
Maybe I should get some headphones.
Hang on, is that better?
That's a lot better. Yes.
I need to because I was trying to get rid of the echo.
Okay, well the echo's gone now.
Okay, as long as the echo's gone, that's the main thing. I don't want you sitting there going, there's like 5 voices coming at me. I know you struggle with my one accent without hearing it tenfold. So in your
I wouldn't say they were the bad guy. No, I wouldn't say they were the bad guy. In fact, when the Crusades invaded Jerusalem, which was the epitome of all the battles that were fought in the First Crusade, it was the apex of all the battles that were fought in the First Crusade. When they took Jerusalem, they from the accounts that I read, they slaughtered the Muslims. They went in there and they killed a bunch of them. Once the Muslims surrendered, the Christians stopped. So it's kind of like when the US and the Allies were fighting the Japanese never wanted to surrender, so the Americans just dropped 2 nukes on them, killed a lot of people. Once the Japanese surrendered, that was it. It was diplomacy as usual. So the Crusades, you could say, it was a similar situation in which one surrendered, the Crusades stopped, and they had a peace treaty.
So,
and, yeah.
To the people who continuously tell us how we should be ashamed of our history, we should be ashamed of the Crusades, the reason why we're being attacked now, and I've been told this myself, and they continuously refer to me, is because of the Crusades and what Christianity did. And I always say to them, well, there's no point in throwing that at me because I'm an atheist, so that's really not relevant to me. But we are constantly made to feel like our history is why we're getting all of the trouble that we get now in today's society. So to all those people, whether they be left, whether they be right, whether they be Muslim, non-Muslim, that want to shame us for our history, what would you say when they try to use that as their justification for what's happening now?
Justification for Muslim terrorism?
Not even justification for everything that happens that's bad to our country, to America, to any country really, where anything bad, whether it be terror attacks, whether it be the left rampaging the way that they are doing right now, they will, even the left will say to me, well, you know, you've got a lot to answer for colonialism and the Crusades, and they always want to throw the Crusades into there. So to all of those who would use the Crusades as a justification for what is going on in modern day society now, what would your answer be to them in the politest possible way?
I mean, it's an inadequate argument. When you look at the real history of it, the Crusades was, it was really a war. I mean, it was not just like a few battles. You're talking about a war and a conflict that took place in the late 11th century. And it didn't really end until, oh my goodness. Let's see. The last Crusader bastion, the last battle for the last surviving Crusader bastion was in the year 1291. So you're starting a conflict. You're talking about a conflict that started in 1098 and ends at 1291. But then even after that, you have the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire doesn't fall until the 20th century. And the Russians were fighting the Ottomans, and the Russians eventually crumbled the Ottoman power to the point where it became what was, it got given the title of the sick man of Europe. And then the British kind of just finished them off with Lord Allenby and all that stuff. So you're talking about also Islam. So Islam began as a theological concept, a theological argument and a disagreement with Orthodox Christianity. I know you're an atheist, but this is the reality. Christianity.
Yeah, you had to get that little dig in.
Right. Well, Christianity believes that God is three. So God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Islam arose as being, it really arose as a part of a series of theological controversies that started out in the, I want to say in the 4th century, with the rise of Arius, but also with other heretics like Nestorius and Eutychius and all these ancient heretics who rose up doubting Orthodox Christianity. And Islam comes in the midst of all of this. And Muhammad presents himself as really the guy who's got it all figured out, theologically speaking, and saying, listen, Jesus Christ is not God. Yes, there was a virgin birth, but she did not give birth to God the Son, etc., etc. And so it started out as a theological disagreement. And that theological disagreement eventually led to a war. It was very much like what happened in the 30 Years' War. You know, the Catholic Church dominates Western culture for over a millennia and a half. And then in comes Martin Luther and all these different reformers, and they say, this is all wrong. The Catholic Church is wrong on this point and on that point, on this point. The Catholic Church is right on this point and that point, but it's wrong on this point. And they end up creating this movement to sever itself from the Catholic world. And eventually it erupts into a war. And how long did that war last? I mean, come on. How long did that war last? A very long time. Like, you had the first Protestant Catholic War, like in the 16th century. And then in the early 17th century, in 1609, the Catholics and the Protestants erupted in a very brutal war called the 30 Years' War. And even before that, you had the wars of religion in France between the Calvinists and the Catholics. So you're talking a very long time. And then even in modern times, you have problems. Like, you have the struggle in Ireland. And I'm sure there was other issues, other factors behind that as well. But of course, religion was involved. So it starts out as a theological conflict. And if people could just understand that, I think a lot of confusion would be dissipated. If people could just understand it, it's a theological.
Do you ever think, though, that history has become so complicated for people to understand, including the terminologies? Listen, I've listened to Dr. Bill Warner. I've watched a lot of your videos, believe it or not, Theo. I have watched quite a few. I've watched your founders. There's lots of people who I've watched, and sometimes they lose me in translation. And it becomes so complicated, so muddied. The war becomes so muddied that actually people are going, there is just so much to take in.
Right.
How would you simplify it?
History is more complex than we make it out to be. Like, even with the Crusades, it's like people kind of simplify. I remember when people first started talking about the Crusades after September 11th. After the September 11th attacks, there was a surge of interest in the Crusades. And everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people like Robert Spencer, they were coming out saying, oh, it was just a reaction to 500 years of Muslim persecution. That's not really the whole truth. Because when I myself looked into the history and began to read the firsthand sources and actual contemporary documents from that time, it seemed to me that it was just a continuation of a war that was going on for a long time before the Crusades. So like I said, the Greeks. The Greeks were fighting the Muslims for a very long time. And the Muslims invaded Syria, which was Christian territory, and Iraq, which was Christian territory. Here's another thing. We talk about the Armenian genocide and all that, but even before that, the Arabs invaded Armenia, I think at around in the 8th century, not too long after Muhammad. And they controlled Armenia for a very, very long time, and they conducted numerous very brutal persecutions. And so you're talking about a conflict that's been going on since the death of Muhammad. So to sit there and say, well, that was, I mean, to answer your question, I don't think I fully answered. To answer your question, who blame the Crusades? I would say the Crusades is just one part of it. What we should be talking about is, in regards to, who's to blame in this, we should be saying is, listen, this is part of a theological conflict. It's a theological conflict. To sit there and let's blame it on the Crusades, you're just talking about one part of this history. What's to blame is the fact that a bunch of people wanted to I use a better word, to obliterate Catholic truth. That's where this begins. And if people could do that, we would get rid of a lot of confusion, because there's a lot of confusion. And maybe when I say confusion, it's not what you see as confusion, because I know we have two different mentalities. Because
we do.
Yeah, because when I go on Facebook and Twitter, or as you guys say, Twitter. The internet.
No teasing it, love. Just one T at the beginning. That's it. Twitter.
Yeah. But when I go on these social media sites, there is like all these people who are talking about, well, Muslims kill gays, and that's why they're up in arms, is because they want to destroy everything that we love in Western society. They want to kill all the gays, and they want to, everyone's talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. They want to kill Milo, and that's what this is about. This is about mean-spirited, ultra-conservative guys who want to just destroy our progressive Enlightenment thinking. And that's like, hold on a second. The Enlightenment didn't pop up until like the 18th century, even before the 17th century, and there was Muslims then. The real reason why Islam arose was not, to destroy the LGBT, as we keep hearing, or to destroy the Enlightenment philosophy.
I think you hear slightly different in America. I mean, I had somebody on my Facebook the other day in America, and they kept sort of saying to me, the English and the British are weak, the British are weak, the British are weak. And I kept saying, the British are weak.
Oh, yeah, I hear that all the time.
They're weak of heart, weak of mind. And I said, you know what, the British and the English, and something else I have to keep correcting you on as well, is that, England in itself was a separate nation. And a lot of people forget that England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales make up the British Isles, but they were 4 nations. And people forget that they were 4 nations, and they only refer to it as being almost one nation. But we are actually still 4 nations, made up of the English, the Irish, the Scottish, and the Welsh. And the English have never been weak people, and we're not weak, but we do have a weak government.
I've never believed that, though. And I know if I respond to what you just said, we could delve off. So I'm not gonna delve off into a completely different subject.
Let's not go off completely.
I'm gonna interconnect it with the main issue here. I hear a lot of people. I've been hearing this for years, like, the Europeans are weak. They're gonna see, and this actually goes hand to hand to what I'm saying, to what I've been telling people. When people say, the Muslims are gonna invade all of Europe. I mean, it's just like, I have difficulty believing that. Well, why do I have difficulty believing this? Because it's never happened. It's never happened. The Muslims have managed, as far as invading Europe goes, to invade just the areas of the Mediterranean, like Cyprus, Greece, Spain. They even had difficulty controlling parts of southern Italy. But even when they took over Spain, it's not like they, we talk about Islamic Spain or the Muslim occupation of Spain. It's not like they occupied it and that was that. Like the Spaniards just kind of submitted and said, okay, let's all just speak Arabic and dress up like Arabs and all that. It wasn't like that at all. As soon after the Muslims controlled Spain, there was insurgency. There was a revolt, a reconquista that commenced very quickly. It all begins in a cave. It's called the Cave of Covadonga. I would suggest the listeners Google that. Cave of Covadonga.
You might have to send me a message later with the typing of the spelling of that, and I will put that out and get people to look it up.
The Cave of Covadonga is where the Spaniards, I believe, first got together and thought of a plan of how they were going to revolt. And that is the place where they sparked their zeal to fight. So
what you're saying is, what I would say is that the English and the British, what we are renowned for, it's a bit like the bully in the playground. While you're calling us names, we'll keep on and we'll keep on and we'll ignore it and we'll ignore it. When it comes to the point of you putting your hands on us, we will retaliate. And the English and the British are known for that. We will tolerate so much, but when it comes to the point where we can see, and I'll be honest with you, America is slightly different. You're a huge, vast area. Like I told you before, United Kingdom would fit into a tiny corner of Texas. So we are seeing it. I think I went to the East End to watch a friend of mine. He's a cage fighter. I will say he won. And when I went there, I had to go to the East End. And as I walked through the East End, not only did I stand out like a beacon with blonde hair, which I really did stand out like I got a big luminous sign on the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it was like walking through, like I've been to Egypt, and it was like walking through a town in Egypt or Islamabad or Pakistan. It wasn't like walking through what they keep telling us is a diverse community. I didn't see that much diversity. I saw a lot of Muslims in that area, and so they sort of occupied that area, and then they become a little bit extreme and intolerant to anybody who may or may not want to live their life their way, and they push that way. That's what we're seeing, and people are now pushing back. They are.
Here's the thing, though. I keep hearing this idea that the Muslims are going to invade Germany. They're not invading crap. They'll invade. This is what I think. They're going to invade some parts of the Mediterranean European countries, like the southern European countries, as they did in the past. Even the Ottoman Empire. Look at the Ottoman Empire, like the greatest of all Islamic empires. They made an alliance with European countries. They made an alliance with Germany. They made an alliance with France in the past. And they didn't invade those countries. So people say, oh, England is going to be invaded by Muslims. England has fought much tougher enemies in the past. Germany. And the Germans wanted to invade England. They couldn't.
Yes, I did.
So where do we get this idea that a bunch of migrants from the Middle East, from the Third World, from North Africa, are going to come in and invade England? It's beyond me how people can think that's actually.
I do think that I think because we are so small, and because we've also, like I said to you, look, we've had major historic buildings in London bought up using Sharia bonds. We've got Sharia courts operating. I put it on my website. If you have a look on my website, you will see that there is an article written up by a Muslim woman who is actually married to a Christian, I might add, but who is actually exposed how the investigation into these Sharia courts is a complete sham. And our government is allowing that. And I think when people refer to being they do feel under attack, and especially in certain areas such as Luton Bury Park, such as the East End of London, there are areas of Birmingham where there are no-go zones in the UK, as in they may not have a big sign up that says Sharia zone, but it's not a safe place to go if you're non-Muslim. And I think when you look at the mass rapes of predominantly white girls in this country, which I will tell you now, it's getting every single day. We're seeing people walk away with less than 2-year prison sentences. This is because we don't have enough spaces in our prisons. We just don't have them. But if you're so-called far right, they'll lock you up for 2 years. Rape a girl, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why people in the UK feel like they are being invaded. I get where they're coming from. But that's because I see this every single day.
Yeah. But even then, though, even with that said, I don't think you guys are going to become a Muslim country. No, I don't see it happening.
I think that before that happens, I do think that you will see, like I said to you, this bulldog spirit that we talk about, that the English and the British do have, and we do possess it. You can only bully us so far before we will react, and that includes against our government. You can only, our government can only, for example, bringing it up to today, what's happening today, look at what happened with the elections in America. You had President Trump elected, and we get snowflake generation piling to our streets in their thousands in London to protest about him coming for a state visit invited by our Queen, and they're up in arms over it. They're up in arms over in America over it. They're up in arms over here over it. So I suppose when we say invaded, I don't think it is just feeling invaded by Muslims. I think we feel slightly invaded by the liberal left, the crybaby nation.
Well, I'm glad that you have expanded the blame on other people because
I'm always very fair, Theo.
Yeah, well, because I feel like everyone, I don't feel this, I see it. I see that a lot of people blame just immigrants. And I keep telling people, well, people put those immigrants there. Who put them there? Governments did. And what was the reason for that? There's an agenda behind it. There was a very interesting presentation done on the European Union. It was done by a guy named by the name of Bernard Connolly. He's English, or British, I should say. Bernard Connolly, who worked within the EU Commission. So this guy worked within the EU, and now I believe he works for the Bank of England or something like that. But he has a prestigious, reputable position. Mm-hmm. And he gave a very fascinating presentation on the European Union. And he actually said in this presentation that the European Union wants Muslim terrorism to happen, because when Muslim terrorism does occur, it increases the power of the state, because it then allows the state to justify expanding its military, expanding its border patrol, and increasing military budget.
I get what you're saying, but I've got to be honest. I mean, I'm just looking at, because obviously there are people. Have I lost your silence there?
No, I'm listening.
Sorry, I'm just looking because we have got people commenting on the YouTube clip itself. Okay. And what they're saying is they do. It's not that they feel that they're at war or being invaded. They are. As far as they're concerned, they are. And what they're saying is that the most common name in the UK at the moment is Mohammed. It's the demographics are quite terrifying. They are terrifying. I don't know if you've ever looked at the demographics.
No, I've looked into it myself.
And that is quite and it is the birth rate. And I believe as well that it's also been proven that especially within the Pakistani community, they have the most birth defects as well, which also puts a strain on. Sorry?
Yeah. Well, isn't it because the English kind of stopped having kids?
I don't think it's because a lot of people have this assumption as well that we just went, that's it, I only want one baby, or I don't want any children. And it wasn't like that. That really was something that was, to a degree, it was kind of forced onto us. If you think about it from my perspective, my mum had 4 children. And by the time I sort of left school, and was old enough to have children, there was this shame that even if you were a married person and you had 2 children and a wife stayed at home while you went to work, 2 things. One, wages weren't enough for the man to go to work and actually be able to support his family. So the women were forced to go back to work to be able to afford to have just 2 children. So that was one of the problems. It was also the fact that if you had children and you stayed at home and was a stay-at-home mum, people would look down. There was this attitude of looking down their nose at people for choosing to stay at home and raise your children. Well, I will hold my hands up. I stayed at home. I raised my children until my ex-husband became extremely ill and he wasn't able to work for just over a year. I went back to work and I brought home the bread and butter, as we say. When he was well enough, he went back to work. But I raised my children and I was a stay-at-home mum. But because doing that, I could only afford 2 children there. I couldn't have afforded more than that.
Can I just interject for one moment?
Of course.
Okay, I'm on the internet, so I Googled top most popular baby names in the UK. And what I read, this is according to The Guardian, so you may say that they're lying, I don't know. But they say that the top most popular baby names as of 2014 in England and Wales is Ellis, Joey, and Jackson are new entries to the top 100 most popular boys' name. So they give you the top 100 girls' names in Wales and England, and number 1 is Amelia. Number 2 is Olivia. Number 3 is Isla. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some sensationalism going on with this whole thing about Muhammad. Now, in all fairness to what you're saying, there are reports saying that Muhammad is now this very popular name, which I'm not denying it. It probably is. But I'm giving you this information to kind of maybe to hopefully lead people to maybe have more of a balanced view. Like there's hope, It's not like you're.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say. What you're saying is it's kind of what I've been saying for a long time. People have got this attitude that the fight is over before it's begun.
Right.
Throw the towel in. This would be like if you were in a boxing ring and you were having a fight. It's a bit like watching Rocky. Rocky gets the living crap kicked out of him right up until the last minute when suddenly he finds a second ring and he fights back. We're not so different. And I get a little tired, just as you probably do, of this defeatist attitude that I see.
We're all going to die.
I think that's what you and I do agree on. People are ready to throw the towel in. It's over. Our country's, and I look at you and I go, well, actually, I'm not ready to throw the towel in. I'm not ready to quit on my country. I'm not ready to give up just yet. I think there's a lot of things. I do think there's change in the air. I don't know about you, but I do think that Trump getting elected has really rattled a lot of countries.
It has sparked a lot of energy for the cause of the Eurosceptic parties. That's what I'm seeing, especially like Front National in France, and also with the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany. And you have a lot of the conservative or the right-wing blogosphere in America that is really riling around them, just giving them all sorts of praise and applause. And people kind of get upset with me because I'm something of a pessimist when it comes to this sort of thing. Donald Trump, while a lot of people are very excited about him, and I'm glad that he won as opposed to Hillary Clinton, again, we have to remember he's a president and he should be open to criticism as well as praise.
I totally agree. I think we are all open to criticism, whether it be you,
of course,
me, or anybody. I mean, let's face it, Theo, you and I have conversations, and I'm quite happy to sometimes criticize your opinions because I don't share all of your opinions. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point of freedom of speech, is the right to criticize. And I do think we are seeing a pushback, but I do understand that people feel they're losing I feel differently, maybe because it's like, for example, Muslim women. And I put a picture up, I don't know if you saw them on my Facebook, of 3 Muslim women who have stood up in the House of Lords and said, Sharia courts and Sharia law must be stopped in this country. If you do not stop it, this is what will happen.
Right.
Now, to me, I applaud those women. I think that's amazing courage to actually have the courage to stand up and say, we don't want this here. So I will back and support people who will stand up against Sharia courts operating in this country. The fact that it's being, don't get me wrong, it's being swept under the carpet in a big dirty mouth. It really is being swept under the carpet. But these women who then say, well, actually, no, if you're going to investigate them, let's do this properly. In fact, let's not investigate them, let's shut them down.
But here's the thing, though, is here's my
But
problem.
you get a lot of hate from the right then. Do you see what I mean?
I get hate from the right every single day. In fact, just on Monday of this week, I had a little dialogue / debate on radio. In fact, I had a number of these dialogues with people on this very issue.
I'm the most tolerant of you.
Right. I had a little bit of a debate with, because, you know, here's the thing, is we talk about the liberals, right? And for years we've been talking about liberals. I am more worried about evil from within the conservative movement than I am the liberals. Because with the liberals, we all know what they stand for, right? We all know communism, they're socialists, they're eco-terrorists, environmentalists, they're pagans, they're pro-choice, pro-homosexuality, pro-perversity. We all know that. There's no hiding it, okay? You're not going to hide that. They worship the devil. They worship the devil openly. But with the right-wingers, you have a lot of these people who say that they believe in God and that they're patriots and that they're for traditional values, when in reality, it's a front for something diabolical and sinister. So in Europe, you have people taking advantage of the immigration crisis. People, and when I say these things, for some reason, people think that I hate white people or something like that. It's like, it's absolute rubbish.
I'd be really upset if you hated white people, because I don't want to point out the obvious, but
Yeah.
and you and I actually, even like I said, we don't share the same views, but
No.
I would like to say that yes, I would class you as somebody that is an acquaintance or a friend, even though our views are so different.
Right. But here's the thing, is that people are, like I said, people are using this crisis, this immigration situation, as a front for agendas. I mean, it's like anything else. When you have a problem, people use it to advance a certain agenda. It happens all the time. It's a very common strategy. So you have these organizations in Europe, not really so much in England, but a lot in like France and in Central Europe, where some of them call themselves identitarian. And in Austria, you have an identitarian movement. It really began in France with the identitaire. I can't pronounce the French, but generation identity is what they call themselves. They made a branch in Germany, and also they made a branch in Austria.
Theo's just lost his signal for some reason. He's going to think I cut him off now. Just bear with me while I get him back on. He does this. He's probably knocked it with his elbow or something. So we will continue this as soon as we get him back on. So let's just give him a second. This goes to prove that this is live, because these things happen. So if it looks like I'm sitting here like a donut talking to myself, I'm really not talking to myself. But he does have obviously you've got to remember, let me just message him on. Okay, just try again. I can't account for these kind of things. Are totally and utterly out of my control. There's nothing I can do about it other than keep trying to get him back on. And I do find it, look, I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but I do agree with his right to his opinion.
Hello?
And he's back. I bet you touched
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. I really don't. It just disconnected. It's very strange.
Well, I think that as your male, we'll blame it on you.
Yeah.
Purely as a female prerogative, of course.
Right.
So you were saying,
what was the last thing that I said before we got cut off?
we were talking about the way that you believe the right. I think over here we have the left and the right. Over there you have the Republicans and the Conservatives, don't you? And I think
what I was saying was that the liberals, like, you all know what they believe in, right? They say that they're for homosexual marriage and abortion, and they worship the devil, and they're pagans and all these things. They make their agenda quite open. The liberals do. Whereas the conservatives, they kind of hide it behind traditionalism. And I believe that those people are actually more dangerous than the liberals, because it's not, it's not the devil that you know that you should worry about. It's the devil that you don't know that you should be more concerned about. So in Europe right now, you have a lot of these conservative movements that are using the immigration situation to advance their agenda. And it's a very common strategy. I mean, people do it all the time. Like, anytime you have a problem of that magnitude, you're always going to have people who are going to use the situation to advance some sort of an agenda. I mean, it's the bottom line.
But everybody has an agenda, Theo. Everybody, doesn't matter who.
Of course, but at the same time, I mean, come on, not all agendas are the same.
Come on, no, they're not. But that's like saying you don't have an agenda, and you do. You have your own person.
Yes, but you see, I'm not sitting here going around saying you're going to get invaded. I'm actually telling people, listen, let's be balanced here.
Yeah, but we've also had conversations when we took, for example, atheism. Okay, and you told me that out in America there are some of the, from what you're describing, some of the most repugnant people I could ever imagine meeting. But but yet talking to me, I've told you I will defend my country, and it's to remain a Christian country. So there are people like me who do, I suppose, break the mold in many different ways. And there are some opinions of yours that I get. For example, I get the whole. I don't think the English are weak. I don't think the British are weak. I don't think
so either. As I said, I don't think so.
No, and I agree with you. So on that we agree. But I also do understand why people in the UK feel as though they are being invaded, and it looks as though they're being invaded. And when we start seeing things being foisted upon us, and there are things being foisted upon us, and we see the huge boatloads of young fighting fit age men coming into the country, and the next thing you know, I mean, I shared an article the other day, and a guy who was guilty of rape, our government had given him compensation of £170,000.
Did you post the story up, by the way?
Yeah, it's on my profile. Now, he was given £170,000 by the government because they said that the time he'd spent in prison had gone over, and it was unfair. It was an unfair sentence, that's what they say, for rape. Now, when you're seeing that, and it becomes a regular cycle, when I've got women contacting me that are saying that not only did it happen to them, but it is still happening, that these men are getting girls to duck down in footwells of cars, and they use fear against their mother as far as going and turning up at the house and pointing a gun in the mother's face.
Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
So what I'm saying, when you start looking at that and then put yourself into the position of a small country like the United Kingdom, you can see why this looks to them like an invasion.
Yeah, you have these, I mean, those are crimes, horrific crimes, but those are crimes that happen everywhere, actually. It happens here all the time, and it's not done by Muslims. Usually it's done by other people.
Listen, like I said to people, we've got rapists in every creed and every color.
You had an English guy go to Africa. I did a whole story on this. He went to, I think, Uganda, and he raped thousands of boys.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is the difference.
He was a white guy.
I can give you 41 towns, Theo, where there are Muslim grooming gangs. 41 towns and cities across the UK, mostly in England, where
Yeah.
Muslim grooming gangs, and what they do is they pass them amongst uncles, brothers, and cousins. What I don't think people realise is it's not just predominantly white girls. Muslim girls are being raped,
I know.
but they don't speak out because of Sharia law that's applied to them within their own communities. So if we don't know about it, we can't address it. But when it comes to predominantly white girls, there has been Sarah Champion. She's an MP. She did an article where she said she believes in the region of nearly 1 million girls. That's the difference. And when you come and people say to me,
Girls?
yeah,
Yeah, this is a sex trafficking business.
of course it's a sex trafficking business, but the difference is when these girls are raped, Theo, they're called filthy white cover. They're told they're white trash. That's the difference. When Stuart Hall, Rolf Harris, all of these famous people, the BBC, all the paedophiles within the BBC, they didn't care whether that child was black, white, or indifferent. They didn't care. A child was a child and it was available. These grooming gangs are targeting predominantly white girls. So there is an issue there, and you can see why people.
Yeah. But Muslims, when Muslims go into an area and they start doing the jihad, they rape any women in the native areas. So, for example, when Pakistan invaded Bangladesh, they raped like 100,000 women or something like that. Bangladeshi women, and you can say the same thing about the Muslims in Africa. I mean, the Muslims invaded parts of Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan. They also raped black women as well. So they rape any woman that is in the area that they conquer. Like, look at all the Iraqi women who were raped in ISIS.
Here's the key word of what you just said, is they rape in whatever area they conquer. And when you look at the towns that I'm talking about, they are areas where the predominant people are, the percentages are higher within the Muslim communities. And then they go outside of the communities to target, as you've said, those who are not Muslim. So what I'm trying to I suppose what I'm trying to say to you is, I'm in agreement with you on certain things with regards to, I don't think this country's done yet. I think we've got a lot of fight left in us.
You still have a government. You still have British sovereignty.
We have a government with a prime minister, Theo, who said Sharia is good for the country. Come on.
Great Britain is like the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yep.
Very well.
Still have a prime minister.
I wouldn't consider it an occupation. I would consider it a problem that needs to be dealt with. Shouldn't be ignored. But at the same time, I wouldn't consider that an occupation.
I would say that when you've got a prime minister, and you've got to remember, people like me didn't get to vote for our prime minister. Okay, so when people go, well, you vote for it, no, only the Conservatives could vote, because when David Cameron gave us our referendum, instead of seeing the job through and allowing us to vote in the general elections in 2020, what he did was he resigned. Now that meant that the only people who could vote for a new prime minister were Conservatives. So anybody who wasn't a member of the Conservative Party or hadn't joined the Conservative couldn't vote. Now, our prime minister has said Sharia is good for the country. Our government is planning to move into a building purchased under Sharia bonds.
I know it's a problem. I'm not arguing with you on that at all. But I just don't think it's an occupation, and I don't think that the white race is going to be disappearing anytime soon. Because I hear people all the time saying the white race is going to be gone and they're going to exterminate the white race. I think the quote unquote white race, which is a term that I don't think is an accurate term because there's different sorts of people living in Europe, but the white race has dealt with more difficult problems than it is doing now.
But the difference is, back then, I do think that we had a different set of leaders. within our
different set of values, maybe.
And I think, yeah, to a degree, I'd agree with you. I mean, I'm not going to go down the whole, like I said to you before, you will never get me saying that, you know, religion is for me. It's not. That is a personal choice. But as I've said to you before, the values that I have and the culture that I have come from a Christian country and being raised in a Church of England school, you know,
Yeah.
going into assembly, singing the hymns in assembly. I did all of that. I could probably sing more hymns than you could.
Probably.
Oh, I guarantee you, and I'd know all the words to them. So, you know, I was raised with those values, and they're what people, and I do think that morally, I do think that not just my country, but your country and many other countries, sometimes their morals leave a lot. I mean, I watched the mass left demonstration. I don't know if you saw them.
No, I didn't see them.
But there was women out there dressed as giant vaginas.
Oh yeah.
Now
You're
this was
talking about the women's rally here.
well, they called it a feminist march, and I dispute them as feminists. They're not feminists, they're feminazis. They just hate men. Men have penises, they don't have one.
Can you say bad words on this show?
I'll allow you to say bad words if you like.
Well, I mean, isn't it true in England you would call them cunts?
Yes.
They're cunts, mate.
It's not a word I like to use if I can help it. I actually refer to them as twats because I believe that that's what they behave like, that's what they look like, and if you're going to act like one and look like one, then you must be one.
Yeah.
But they'll always say things like feminism. You're not feminists. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
You say nothing about FGM. So you say nothing about Sharia law. You say nothing about the mass rape of these girls. A true feminist will stand up against all of those things.
So here's the thing, though, is I don't really have I'm not really disputing with what you're saying here in regards to Muslim immigration. I think it is a problem.
It's not the immigration.
Again, I just don't believe in this doom and gloom stuff that I hear every single day. Like literally every single day of how we're being invaded and all. Like England is still England, Great Britain is still Great Britain. Listen, I went to Europe. In 2015, twice I went to Europe, and people were having a great time. like okay, this is not how an invaded people act. So I'm not buying this whole gloom and doom.
Actually, I would dispute you on that, and I'll tell you why.
No one's having a good time. They're all kind of in depression.
No. What I would dispute you on is you say that nobody who's being invaded will be having a good time. Not true at all. You've only got to look. You've studied I know you've been studying a little bit of the First and Second World War, which we will cover in another show because I think that'll be a really interesting topic to cover.
Cover it now if you want.
But during the war, when bombs were being dropped on people, they were still laughing. The one thing that the English and the British have always done, we have always laughed in the face of adversity. Because it's the only
exactly the bombing of Berlin. I mean,
say that again.
So this is not exactly the bombing of Berlin that we're talking about.
No, it's not. But what I'm saying to you is, and you're talking about immigration. You're not. There's also mass illegal immigration. You've only look at the state of France. Look at the state of France. Now, France is one tunnel. One tunnel. That's all it is, Theo. Separating us and France.
France is what? One tunnel?
One tunnel. Yeah, Channel Tunnel. You get on one end, boom, you're in England.
Yeah.
So we've had them coming in, storming through the tunnel.
But again, I have more hope than a lot of people, than I think most of these people on the internet who just keep talking about being invaded all the time.
No, I agree. Listen, I am the first one.
It just doesn't make any sense to me that in the past, Europe has dealt with more difficult issues. Like they had the Muslim invasions in the 8th century. Still, Europe prevailed. You had, for example, the Ottoman Empire invade Italy in the late 16th century, and when the Ottomans invaded Otranto, Spain intervened and beat the hell out of them and drove them out. again, Christendom prevailed. So you have a lot of problems. What I think is going to happen in the future is that certain European countries are going to be evil, and certain European countries are going to be good. And even in the Bible, it talks about the end times, you know, the final war. And it says that 7 nations will lead the fight. So there's hope. That's what I'm saying.
But this is what I'm saying to you. I agree with you. There is hope. It's not over yet. There's an old saying, right? It ain't over till the fat lady sings. Okay, and I actually agree with that. And I'm one of the fat ladies, so I can say that. Okay, and it's not over. It's never over.
I don't think that British politicians are sitting there saying we're going to kill the white race.
No, what they are saying, though, what they are doing is they are ignoring what Joe Public is telling them is happening within their own cities. It's being dismissed. They are not.
I think that's part of the agenda, though.
But if that's part of the agenda, then part of the agenda is actually to force this kind of thing onto us.
I think it's part of the agenda. Just hear me out for a moment here. Look at Boris Johnson. Do you know how in London they have this Muslim mayor? What's his name? Tariq Khan?
Yeah.
He's not the first Muslim mayor.
He's the first Muslim London mayor.
No, he's not the first Muslim London mayor. The first Muslim London mayor was Boris Johnson.
Yes, he's heritage.
No, that guy, I think he is a Muslim. He's a closet Muslim. Here's what I think about Boris Johnson.
Do you know what? I wouldn't disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. And I actually think he played the game.
Yeah, he played the game. Boris Johnson.
I agree with you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Boris Johnson is of Turkish and German descent.
But I think, yes. And German descent, which is even more.
Yes, German and Turkish descent. Exactly. And Boris Johnson, his last name is not even Johnson. His real last name should be like Ahmed or something. And I think it's like Boris Ahmed.
That's right.
And when I think it was like his great grandmother came into the UK, she picked the most generic English last name you could imagine. Just to keep people away from, just to keep people paying any attention to her family, because she didn't want the negative attention, given that she was Middle Eastern. So here you have Boris Johnson, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Boris Johnson played the game, and he said, if we don't have a Brexit, then all the Muzzies are going to come in and invade England.
Actually, he never said that.
But he did. He used it. He even said that Turkey is going to join the EU, and Turkey is going to flood Europe with all sorts of.
Turkey did actually intend to join the EU. I can vouch for that categorically. I can't tell you how I know. I'll tell you that in a private conversation one day. But I can tell you now that was the full intention. Full.
But you see, at the same time, Boris Johnson advocates for Turkey to join the EU.
Exactly. Listen, Boris Johnson does this game where he plays the bumbling idiot, right?
Yes.
And people buy into the bumbling idiot. And they go, oh, he's an idiot, doesn't know what he's doing. Fine, let him get on with it. He's not hurting. Actually, that makes him more dangerous because he's not an idiot.
He's not an idiot. No, he's very intelligent.
But what he didn't expect was for people. He was the guy who put the big banner up on the bus saying 350 million will go back into the NHS. But the person who got the blame for that was Nigel Farage. But Nigel Farage led his own campaign, had nothing to do with the Leave campaign at all. They were not his words. He never put that out there. Boris Johnson's did. But the only person who got blamed was actually Nigel Farage. Politics is a dirty game. It's always been a dirty game, and it will always be a dirty game. But the biggest problem you've got within the House of Lords is there is a lot of this hierarchy. And we know what's best for the working class. You bloody well do as you're told. You know, we're the intelligent ones. You will do as you're told. And this whole attitude that the working class are thick, stupid, and can't think for themselves. Well, of course, people are thinking for themselves. People are educating themselves. Some get there a little quicker than others. Some get there a little slower. But people are working this out. and they never expected that.
But here's my point,
Public are using them.
But here's my point, though. My point is that people are using the migration situation for an evil agenda. For an evil agenda. Not only, now think about it. Boris Johnson does a video. And by the way, there was a post that I did on this a few days ago. There was a British political commentator. I'm trying to remember his name. His last name is Moore. Graham Moore, that's his name.
Yeah.
You know him?
Yeah.
What do you think of him?
I get on all right with Graham.
Oh, okay. Well, he did a post. He did an interview in which he said, "Listen, the biggest threat to Europe is not ISIS. The biggest threat to Europe is not Donald Trump, nor is it Russia. The biggest threat to Europe is Germany."
Oh, he's right.
He is absolutely right. And here's the thing: is that Germany made a deal with Turkey to bring in all these migrants. And that sparked this whole outrage throughout Europe, where you have all this energy behind this enterprise to disintegrate the EU. And if you disintegrate the EU, what's going to happen? What will happen is you're going to have new alliances form within the continent of Europe. So in fact, they were already talking about this after Brexit. The night of Brexit, there were already people in Germany saying, listen, the southern European states could create their own union. And now you have people talking about how the central European states will create their own union if the EU falls. And so by getting rid of the EU, you can, in a way, rearrange the power structure in Europe. So just to put it in simple terms, the EU, and I know people will disagree with me on this, but this is the truth. The EU was formed as a way to keep Germany in check. NATO was formed for 3 reasons. It was to keep America on top, it was to keep Russia out, and it was to keep Germany low. It was to keep Germany.
The problem is, though, the EU stopped being about that a very long time ago.
But if you have a disintegration of, with the disintegration of the EU, with Great Britain leaving, because for years Germany kept talking, and I know we disagree on this issue, but for years Germany kept talking about making an EU military force. Great Britain was saying no, no, no. Now with Great Britain gone, what happens? You have this meeting of European leaders without Great Britain, by the way. A meeting of European leaders, I think in Slovakia, in which they were talking about how are we going to rule in a world where Great Britain is not part of the EU and where America doesn't really give a crap about us anymore with the rise of Donald Trump. In other words, Germany is trying to set itself up as the leader of a new world order.
I'd agree with you to a degree on that, to a degree. What I will say is, first of all, the EU army, all of that was being created well before we had the chance of a referendum.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
I kind of believe that, I believe, see, we have a democracy, you don't have a democracy, you have a constitution, am I right in saying that?
We have a constitutional republic.
Right, whereas we have a democracy. And what we've got is, we've got our Ramonas, well, we want to stay in, well, tough shit, because the majority voted to leave. It doesn't matter, if you have a relay race, whoever comes in first comes in first. They don't come in second, third, and fourth.
I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is that people they knew, these politicians in the European Union knew exactly what the consequences would be by bringing in all these migrants. You can't tell me people are that stupid. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They knew the spark that it would start. The spark of ultranationalism and all these things. Now you have the political climate in Europe changing. Not so much in England, at least from what I know about England, but more so like in France and also in Germany. where you have,
without a doubt, I do think that the Brexit has led people in other countries to go, do you know what? We can do this. Because what we showed was, because a lot of people, you've got to remember, for a long time, I've heard people, especially young kids, they go, oh, you know, it's no point in voting. Voting's a waste of time. Your vote's never counted. It's all fixed. So don't bother voting, which kind of, putting it bluntly, pisses me off, because I know in this country, if you don't vote, your vote goes to the party in power. So if you've got the Conservatives in power and you don't vote, your vote that you didn't make goes to that party. Mm-hmm. So when we did the Brexit, we pushed and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed to get people off their backsides, off their sofas, away from their couch potatoes, and actually get out there and make your mark. And that's exactly what they did. And the government were not prepared. They did not expect the people to vote en masse the way that they did. And I think that's led to a little bit of I think that's like a snowball rolling down a hill, gathering momentum. And it kind of knocked on to France, and France want the Brexit, and then you've got Germany, they want theirs. I think Angela Merkel's days are numbered, if I'm honest.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that you have this
but
election.
Blair, Cameron, and Bush, and all
Sarkozy and all that. Yeah, they're all. That's it. They're all the dying breed. I know. And Trump and Brexit really illustrated that. Listen, the old guard is done with. And I think the only reason why Trump picked a guy like Mike Pence was because he knew that you still got a lot of people in America. I know because I live here. You got a lot of people in the United States who are still loyal to the old guard. They don't like Trump. So Trump picked Mike Pence because he's part of the old dying breed. Kind of like keep the other people happy. But as far as Europe goes, you have this change in political climate, but it's not necessarily good. So let me just give you 2 examples here. Well, maybe 3. Look at, for example, Bjorn Höcke, who's a politician in Germany. Look what he said about the Holocaust Memorial not too long ago. He said that the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin was a monument of shame. And why would they want to put this monument of shame? We need a 180-degree shift in the way we see things. They're trying to use guilt to keep us down. And why did they put this monument here? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, for a politician, especially of his rank, to be saying stuff like this, from what I've read, would have been unheard of like 10 years ago. You know, and then you have, for example, this German politician, I think his name is Andreas Schulz. He is one of the heads of the, not the Christian Democratic Party, but the Christian Social Union, which is the sister party for the Christian Democrats. And he said that the worst thing ever, he didn't say the worst thing ever is a Muslim immigrant. He said the worst thing ever is some Senegalese altar boy who's living in this country and you can't get rid of him. That's what he said. In fact, there was a big outcry from the Catholic Church in Bavaria because of that. I mean, stuff like that, it was like, it indicates that there is a change in the political perception amongst not just the German people, but amongst politicians. And then you also have, for example, Marine Le Pen in France. I don't know if she's going to win. What I do believe, though, is that it's going to be between her and the other guy, the Republican, Fillon, I think his name is.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that. I actually think she's got a good chance of winning because France is
have a good chance, yeah.
such a bloody mess. Honestly, it really is a mess.
But
I do think that those that are classed as being on the right politically, political leaders that are classed as being far right leaders, I think they're on the rise for a reason. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's tired of the same old bullshit.
But what really sparked their popularity was the immigration crisis. Like AFD was nothing when it first came out. 2013, they were nothing. 2013 when they first popped up, they were a Eurosceptic kind of economic based political party. And then what happened was that the founder of the party, I forgot his name, but the founder of the party was thrown out, and he was replaced by this Frauke Petry woman. and replaced by Bjorn Holke and a bunch of these other guys. And these guys use the migration crisis as leverage, and they used it very well. And now they're like the third most powerful party in Germany, which nobody expected to happen. They even dominated Mecklenburg, which is Merkel's state. That's her home state. No one expected them to take that state, but they did. And they took positions in parliament. So going back to resume from where I left off, Jean Le Pen, she said something that to me was very disturbing, especially as a Christian. She said, if I take power, this is not word by word, but I'm paraphrasing here, I'm going to outlaw any sort of public Islamic symbolism, right? The burqa, things like that. But then she says, and you hear that and you think, oh, hip hip hooray, right? And then she says, but to be fair, I'm also going to have to outlaw Christian public display, like somebody wearing a crucifix.
See, I don't agree with that.
Well, but you see, that's what I'm saying. Is you have.
Well, I know what she's trying to do. She's trying to go, you know, well, if we're going to do it for one, we're going to do it for the other. And I don't get this because my brain says, hang on a minute, it's a Christian country.
Right.
Why even I mean, I don't wear it now because my chain broke on it. I have a little cross as an atheist. It was bought for me by my daughter. No other reason than it was a gift from my daughter. But I live in a Christian country. We've had workers here told to remove their crosses because it offends Muslims. We've had people go into supermarkets to buy their alcohol and Muslims refuse to serve them because it goes against their religion. We've got supermarkets providing prayer rooms for Muslims within the workplace. There is no little church for a Christian to go and pray within the workspace. There's no place, well, while you're praying in your little chapel as a Christian, and while you as a Muslim are in there praying in your little mosque in the back room, as an atheist, I'm going to go out and have my food break. Cigarette break to you, because I know what you Americans think of that word. So there's this double standards everywhere you go. There is this double standards, and I do agree that our political leaders, yes, there's been an agenda. I don't think that our political leaders, as of yet, have really woken up to the fact that the general public are saying enough. And I think when they do, they're going to be in for a little bit of a shock.
Do you know the AFD to me is like the BNP, or like the British National Party. That's what they are. They're like the BNP, but they're smarter than the BNP. But look at the BNP. The BNP is not popular in England.
BNP is not popular here.
What's that?
The BNP is not popular here.
That's what I'm saying. The BNP is not popular in England, and I'm glad for that because I don't like the BNP. And so I have hope for England. I don't think the English people are just going to be like, yeah, BNP, you know, gas all the Jews. I even talked to Shane about this. I interviewed Shane. I don't know if you saw it.
I did. I saw the bit that you put up. Yes, I did. Of course, yeah. I watch Theodore. I watch all the things. I don't like to watch him too much because he gets a little bit, you know what I mean, bit of a show off that point.
Well, that's too bad. But
no, I did watch it. I watched it.
Oh, that's fine then. But Shane told me that even with the EDL, you know, the EDL started out kind of with a lot of energy, and then it died out. That's what he told me. It died. And I told him, I said, well, why do you think that it died? And he said, because people really just don't care. So in England, it's kind of like still, even after Brexit, at least it seems to me that it's kind of still the status quo up there.
I would disagree slightly with Shane. I think the reason the EDL died out isn't because people stopped caring. I think there were several reasons behind it. One, people financially couldn't afford to back it. They couldn't afford to be traveling all over the country. They just didn't have the finances. Two, whether people love or hate him, when Tommy Robinson stepped down, there was no bloke out the front leading them in the right direction. therefore it became a divisional thing. I also think that they had all these different, I mean, I've never been EDL or had anything to do, I've never been on a demo or any of those sort of things, but they had all these different divisions. And I kept, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, do you not understand the word division means to divide?
Right.
And what you then do is you set up this almost battleground. Well, my division's better than your division. And, well, no, my division's do it better than your division. And they end up competing against each other. Instead of keeping it as just one movement, one title, no divisional leaders, just one movement, one title, that's it. And everybody getting behind that one thing. And I think then it would have grown in momentum. Unfortunately, that you also have to remember, our police, I know, I can guarantee you this is information I know. I can't tell you how I know. I wish I could, but I do know this factually. Our police were told to target those on the right, i.e. anybody who was English Defence League, anybody who was deemed as far right, you kettle them in, you arrest them, you make sure you use force against them. But the left were left to do as they wanted. But it's the left that got violent, which created a reaction from those on the right, which saw the right arrested. Well, when you, as a woman, have your husband arrested, carted off, he's then slammed up in prison, like Shane was, for 2 years for an empty water bottle being thrown on the floor. Shane got 2 years for that.
I heard about that, yeah.
That breaks down their family. That causes problems within their family. She's now got to cope on her own, raising children with not enough income. This was happening to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how they tried to do it. Our government kept pushing against anybody that they deemed as being far right. And if you were far left, well, no, you can have a voice. You can do what you want. You can behave how you want. We'll leave you to your own devices. So you can see why things like that die out. I mean, how many times can a person be arrested? How many times does a person want to go to prison? Once you've got a criminal record, how are you going to get a job?
I have a guy from England who's running a comment here. I posted the video for the link for this talk on my Facebook page, and I got a guy, his name is Timothy Gibson, and he lives in England. He says that the EDL is full of football hooligans.
Well, I'm not EDL, but I would say there was a lot that were, but not all.
Yeah, but here's the thing about EDL, though. I remember speaking with Shane about this, and he told me, this is in the interview, he said, I said, was there some sort of a conspiracy behind EDL? And he said that the organization of the EDL came from people up in government. That's what he told me. And from what I have read about the EDL, I find it very interesting that Robinson, Tommy Robinson, had a meeting with, what's his name? The guy from the Swedish Democrats. Alan Eiling. Or he goes by Alan Blake.
Oh, Alan Eiling.
Yeah. And they had this meeting, and they were basically talking about starting a war in England. And they said that the way we can start this war is basically go into a Muslim-dominated neighborhood and present really nasty photos of the Prophet Muhammad and piss people off. And they were actually discussing this. So I think that the EDL, again, is part of this agenda of let's get people angry, let's get people riled up, let's start divisions.
I'm not so sure I agree with you on that. I mean, like I said, I can't comment on that because I've never been anything to do with the English Defence League. I've never participated with anything. I know people who are or have been, because as I've said to people many times, I defy you to walk out on the streets and with your arm outstretched without touching the shoulder of somebody who's either been involved, has been involved, or is still involved with the English Defence League. And I'm not so sure that I think that that was the case. I think that what people saw was when the Prophet Muhammad was drawn, it cost people their lives. And I think people in this country, it's a bit like the old, you can't make fun of this, you can't make fun of that. Actually, we've laughed throughout the centuries at religion, we've laughed at whether Jim Davidson, very famous English comedian in this country, and he used to tell jokes about his mate Chalky. Chalky was a black man, and Chalky was his nickname because Chalky's white. Okay, and he would tell these jokes that now would be politically incorrect and deemed as racist. He would tell jokes about gays, and he had gay friends, but of course the gays would get offended. So now we live in a society where we're told, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this, you can't. And I think a bit of us are kind of going, do you know what? We've had enough of that now. If I want to tell a joke, it's a joke. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's just a joke.
But you see, again, I don't know if we're kind of like talking to each other and just ignoring each other.
No, I'm getting you.
Because
I just can't say that I think that there's an agenda.
I don't disagree that I think there is a huge agenda behind it. I mean, look at.
I'm just not so sure that the English Defence League were part of that, because these were just.
I think it was something like that. But see, I'm not really worried about England. That's the thing. I'm not too worried. I mean, look at England. Look at the history of England a little bit. One of the greatest minds in Christian history was an Englishman by the name of G.K. Chesterton. Gilbert Keith Chesterton was one of the greatest minds of not just Christianity, but for the Catholic Church. He actually became a Catholic later in his life. He was born in England, but he converted. They were this guy. Let me tell you something about G.K. Chesterton. He single-handedly prevented eugenics from being enacted into law. And this was before the Second World War. This was, I think, in the 1920s. And they wanted to pass a law in the British Parliament that would have forcibly taken people who were deemed mad or mentally ill and take them away out of society and throw them into a prison. And G.K. Chesterton wrote a book called Eugenics and Its Evils. It was a little book. And this book was distributed into the Parliament, and all the parliamentarians read it. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it was either the great majority of parliamentarians or all of the parliamentarians who said no to this eugenist bill. Now compare that to the United States, where eugenics was rampant in this country. Thousands of people were sterilized. In fact, there were even, I kid you not, several human experiments done on black people in this country. In this country, several of them, by this government, under this title of eugenics and social Darwinism and race hygiene and all this nonsense. But in England, eugenics was not really enacted by the state. And G.K. Chesterton played a huge role in that. And you know that there was a discussion within Rome on whether or not to deem Chesterton a saint? And do you know that they said no, we're not going to call him a saint? Do you know the reason why, though?
I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Because he was a drunk.
I think most of England, we are a drinking nation. We are. Something else we're all criticised for is for being. I mean, I'm not. I'll be honest with you. You're more likely to find me at home with a cup of tea than you are with a bottle of beer or a gin and mound. I'm not a massive drinker. I have a drink every now and again, but I never get falling down drunk. But we are a nation of drinkers. We just are.
But the Vatican said no because he was a drunk.
Well, the Vatican have got a lot to answer for as well, haven't they? I mean,
I know. I agree with you there. But here's the thing.
I was going to say, we're going to go down the Vatican line. Seriously.
I have hope for Britain, though.
Do you know what? I'm going to end this on a positive note because I'm exhausted. I've been up since silly o'clock. On the positive note of, I agree with you. I don't think that the United Kingdom as a whole, and I will call it the United Kingdom, we are 4 nations, Theo. I will get you to understand this, that you can't keep calling people British. We're English, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. United Kingdom, okay?
United Kingdom.
Yeah. Right.
You're Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, well, apparently. But I do know that if I go through my history of my family tree, on my mother's side, there's also a great, 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 great Uncle Abner. So somewhere in me, which is why I do this a lot, there's obviously Jewish in me as well. So I'm a mixture. I'm a
I
high.
don't think about the racial buildup of England. I think it's a mixture of German from the Anglo-Saxons, and then you have the Picts who came from the Mediterranean, and then you also have Vikings, and then you also have French.
We do have I know that the Danes invaded Lincolnshire and raped and pillaged their way through the entire of Lincolnshire. So the Danes, I think that perhaps from the Danish side of it, that's probably where the blonde hair and blue eyes things sort of. I mean, I get inbox messages from people calling me a filthy Aryan bitch, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know whether to be flattered or insulted, because you know, Hitler wanted the perfect race, and apparently I match that description.
Well, I'm looking at your name here, Bugle, and I read here that it comes from Bugler.
You won't find anything on me because that's not my real name.
Oh, never mind. Well, it comes from Austria, in case you wanted to know.
I'll tell you what I will do in private. On Skype, I will send you what my maiden name was.
All right.
All right, and that you'll find very interesting.
All right, I'll look that up. But here's the thing, though, is that the Aryans were not. See, it's wrong to say that the blonde-haired Nordic people are Aryans, because Aryans are people from Persia.
Listen, I think people just throw that at me because they think I'm going to go away and cry. And the truth is, I go away and I laugh. I find it quite funny.
It's stupid.
I'm sitting there going, okay, it's like, but I'm not easily offended by words. Words don't really offend me. This is why I think you and I are very good at being able to agree to disagree on things, and what we agree on, we agree on. And we don't hate each other because our views differ. I've got no hatred towards you, even though some of your views I find, that's what I keep telling people. Oh yeah, he's the extreme Christian. And he'll call me, oh yeah, you're the nice atheist.
Right.
Because we're rare. We're very rare, apparently. In
yes. I try to have a very balanced view of things. You know?
Yeah, but I do think that you had this really completely different idea of the atheist that you have in your country to the atheists we have in this country. I find that. But then again, I suppose, look, I need to come to America at some point, and when I do, introduce me to these atheists.
I don't have any atheist friends.
Well, then how do you know they like it out there?
Yeah, I don't have any atheist friends to introduce to you. But if you look at, you know, there was an atheist YouTuber. I forget his name, but he's got quite the following in England, and he did quite the following on YouTube, actually. But he lives in England, and he did a video on me saying that I should be observed by the government. Like I should have a tracker on my ankle and then watched. Monitored. That was the word that he used, monitored.
See, this is where people get bent out of shape on an opinion. And I had this, when I did that very first interview, and I'm not going to go down the lines of it, but there were certain things that you said that a certain person got extremely upset over and were screaming abuse of foul language about your opinions. And I kept trying to say to him, do you not get this though? This is his opinion. I don't agree with it.
Right.
And he can't enforce it. It's just an opinion. And if we're going to give freedom of speech, if we want freedom of speech, you have to respect that there are going to be people with views you don't agree with. But that doesn't mean they don't have a right to have their view.
Right.
That's the whole point of freedom of speech. Otherwise, we may as well all have a gagging order put on ourselves and not have the right. So whoever made this video saying that, look, you're not going to go out and stop killing people.
No.
Okay? No matter who they are, whether they be gay, straight, black, white, Muslim, non-Muslim. You're not going to go out and stop killing people.
I'm not going to go out. I don't believe in that kind of.
And I'm not going to do that. So an opinion doesn't kill you.
No.
It might upset you.
Very dangerous.
Opinions can be dangerous things if they're pushed on to other people.
Yeah. But
you don't push your opinions onto me. You give me them, and if I don't agree with you, I'm not afraid to tell you because you don't scare me, Theo. Ending that on a really, I do find it fascinating because you do know your history far more than I do, and I think that people need to know more of their history. And I know, as I said, you've been doing a lot on the First and Second World War.
Yeah, I've been reading up on all of that, especially the first. I think the first one is more interesting, more important, I think, because the Second World War was simply a continuation of the first.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
it was just a different tactic that, in order to make sure we.
Yeah, and I think we're going to hit a third world war, and I think that Germany and Turkey are going to be friends.
I totally agree. I think we're on that. We're singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. So the next time I speak to you, perhaps we can cover that.
Of course, yeah. I was trying to, but you kept talking about the Muslim immigrants, and I'm trying to tell you that it's an agenda here. There's a greater agenda, and that is the rise of the state, the EU state, I think.
I actually agree with you.
Yeah.
And I also try to get. You've got to remember, I've got Shane in one ear. I'll say, keep this on topic. Yes, all right, Shane. And then I've got you wanting to go into a different direction. I do try to give a little both ways,
right?
So that we can. And also because if we cover everything now, then I've got no reason to interview again.
Right.
Call it an excuse to get you back, Theo.
All right. Well, let's schedule for another interview, and I'll do it.
Okay. Well, I've got you on Skype, so I will message you, and we'll organise that, because I do think people need to start hearing about that. I think our history is marking out our future.
Yes.
So, but for now, I want to say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And I will get this uploaded also directly to Facebook, so that people who haven't seen it, because a lot of people view on Facebook as opposed to YouTube, but this will be on YouTube and on Facebook. And anybody who wants to contact you and have a discussion with you, I'm sure you won't mind.
During the discussion, you mean?
Yeah, if people have got, the next time we go live,
yeah, I have no issue with that. Yeah.
Then I think that we should get people to start sending some questions over that I can put to you from them.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, my darling. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right.
Until the next time. But take care, stay safe, be good, and stay out of trouble.
All right, then.
All right, you take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.